I want to thank my patron supporters who are helping me to make more videos more often. If you'd like to become a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. Thank you for watching this video.
I guess a lot has changed since you were last in Moskogo. Oh, thank the force!
That's Amy Sedaris returning to the role of Peli Motto, and her line from the latest episode of The Mandalorian pretty much sums up how all of us feel about seeing the baby again, and also the return of The Mandalorian to TV. Hello, this is TJR, and this is going to be my review in reaction to The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1, or as the show's producers refer to it, Chapter 9. Warning, spoilers ahead. A quick advisory. If you are one of those Star Wars fans who is of the hate Disney and Disney must be burned to the ground variety, there are plenty of video channels out there servicing your needs with endless regurgitating loops of hate. You won't be getting any of that here, so I recommend that you go to one of those channels. They do rely on you and your need to feed your hate in order to make their living, so I recommend that you patron those channels.
Strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey towards the dark side will be complete.
Chapter 9 opens with Mando and the baby walking into a fight club. We get some very fun fan service via those lizard aliens from Return of the Jedi. Mando and the baby are seeking an individual known as Gor Koresh, who can help provide information on the whereabouts of a Mandalorian that might be able to help him locate the baby's planet and race of origin. Now, you may remember that the opening scene from Season 1, Episode 1, was very deliberate in establishing Mando as a badass right from the get-go. After they did that, then they were free to let us see his interaction and his journey with the baby, and how this brings out more of his humanitarian side and also his parental instincts. In the opening of Season 2, Episode 1, Mando has the baby at his side, and the show's producers use this opportunity to once again firmly reestablish that, in spite of all this, Mando is still a badass. Yes, he does have a bond with the baby now, but he is still as badass as ever. And now that the show's producers have reestablished this fact at the beginning of Chapter 9, we can now get back to exploring the bond between him and this child. So this episode takes us back to the adopted planet of Luke Skywalker and the return of a familiar character from Season 1, Peli Motto. Earlier I mentioned how one of her lines from this episode sum up how we all feel about seeing the baby again. I love her remarks where she says, "Are you selling him? Just kidding, but I'm not." And I really enjoyed this line because it kind of reminds me a little bit about a similar relationship between a very close friend of mine and one of my younger nieces. She has a similar reaction whenever she sees one of my young nieces. She is so enamored with her, partly because she is really adorable, but she's enamored with her to the point where I think that if she could, she would buy her off my sister. So to me, this moment rang very true. Also, during this scene, we see that Mando has experienced some character growth. He is now okay with droids working on his ship. And this is, of course, after the incidents that happened at the end of Season 1, which once again just proves that we all change and grow. I know that some Star Wars fans were, to put it mildly, distressed with the portrayal of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I have to assume that a lot of them were either very young or have not experienced much life, because time has taught me that if there's one constant, it's that people change, and that people, if you haven't seen them for a very long time, can change in ways that you do not expect or could never even anticipate. We all change and grow, and I like seeing this theme reflected once again in Star Wars and during this scene. So we then get to the city of Moskogo and their local bar, and Mando, when he arrives there, curiously leaves the baby outside. This is by no means a deal breaker for me, but earlier In the opening scene, he takes the baby into the fight club, and rightly so, because I wouldn't leave the baby outside. He states that the baby goes everywhere with him. Now, certainly the outside of this bar and this small town/village doesn't appear anywhere near as dangerous as where we were in the opening scene, but I have to sometimes wonder what makes Mondo decide to bring the baby inside with him and when to leave him outside. Like I said before, it's not a deal breaker, but his behavior sometimes baffles me in regards to this. And since the baby decides to wander into the bar anyway so that he can be adorable hiding inside of I think it was a vase or a jar, I'm not sure which, but since he does do this anyways, there is no real reason to leave him outside, even from just a practical scene perspective either. So we meet the Marshal, whose name is Cobb Vanth, whom I understand is a character from one of the Star Wars novels. He is wearing Mandalorian armor, and allegedly this is some very famous Mandalorian armor, although none of that is stated. The two almost get into a dust-up over the armor until we are introduced to the town's local sandworm. Oh, sorry, their Cryet Dragon. Sorry, wrong franchise. Now, the Marshal makes a deal with Mondo to return the armor in exchange for helping him kill the dragon. And it's here where we learn the Marshal's origin and how he got the armor. And it's also where the series visits one of the first themes that it's going to explore, which is the theme of consequences. Everything has a consequence. Everything has a reaction. My mom used to say, out of everything bad comes something good. This comes out of the very positive attitude that she lived by, and it's also an attitude that I try to live by as well. But I do acknowledge that while oftentimes good things do come out of bad things, there are times when bad things can also come out of good as easily as the reverse is true. After the destruction of the second Death Star, the locals are celebrating the removal of the Empire. They're no longer under their boot heels, when before they know it, they are taken over by, I think they were called the Mining Guild or whatever it is they're called, but basically they militarily take over the town and turn the populace into work slaves. So once again, we're dealing with the theme of consequences here. Everywhere you go, people in societies, whether they be governments, political groups, religious groups, or whatever, they all kind of collectively make assumptions that if we could just accomplish goal A, fill in that blank, if we just accomplish this, then everything else will work out. But everything that happens in a society has a reaction. And sometimes those reactions aren't always good, or they aren't what you would expect. Destroying the second Death Star was good. It prevented a lot of unnecessary death, I'm sure. But the removal of the Empire left Tatooine wide open for a very opportunistic and unscrupulous militant group. And it's the visiting of more mature, more complex societal themes in these newer Star Wars productions that are part of what makes The Mandalorian such a compelling show. Hearing the sheriff's origin story is another reason why The Mandalorian and this episode works. While there is an overall season story arc, the episodes have these smaller, self-contained stories within them that on the surface are very simple. For instance, in this episode, Mondo helps a local sheriff. But within these simple stories, we visit much broader themes such as this one regarding consequences. Realizing that this threat is too big for just the two of them, Mondo recruits the help of the Sand People, which the Marshal is not keen on. And in doing so, we visit another theme in this episode, which is everybody has a point of view, and everybody has their version of the story. The Marshal and his townspeople view the Sand People as enemies. We, the Star Wars audience, have been taught to view the Sand People as bad since the very first movie. During this initial meeting between the Sand People, a fight breaks out between the Marshal and one of their leaders, and we find out that even the Sand People, whom the movies have raised us to see as the bad guys, have their own version of the story. They have their own story to tell. They see the Marshal and his village as the invaders and as the bad guys, and they are not completely unjustified in their opinions. During this scene, there is a moment where Mondo has to break up a fight between the Marshal and one of the leaders of the Sand People, and later in the episode, this moment will repeat itself again when the Marshal now has to de-escalate a potential fight between one of his own and a member of the Sand People who arrive to help them kill the dragon. And in doing so, the Marshal shows growth, having learned that the Sand People are not completely unjustified in their grievances. And so we have an uneasy alliance between former enemies, and you really couldn't ask for better drama than that. So this uneasy alliance makes their stand, and we find out that the dragon has killer vomit. And then we get some superhero action with Mondo and the Marshal going into full Buck Rogers mode. It's great that a Star Wars series like this visits and explores larger themes, but it's also great that the show's producers never lose sight of the fact that Star Wars is supposed to be a fun action series, and this episode delivers that fun action in spades. By the end of the episode, it is also established that the Sand People promise not to take up arms against the residents of Moskogo until the time that a resident of Moskogo raises arms against them. And so Chapter 9 ends with a new alliance between these two, for now, former enemies. And honestly, I left this episode feeling that there really are more stories to tell about Moskogo and their Marshal, and how he keeps the townspeople safe, and how he helps maintain this new alliance between them and the Sand People. I think we've got a couple of good short Star Wars stories to tell, maybe some original short films, maybe a very short series, maybe just one season of maybe 3 to 5 episodes. I think that would be fun. And so now, a few parting thoughts. I was very surprised that the baby during this episode didn't help in some way. But all he did was just be cute, which is great. But I thought he was going to do something with his superpowers. I kept waiting for him to do so, but it just didn't happen. And perhaps in hindsight, this is a good thing. If the baby helps out too often during a serious conflict, it will become a predictable cliche. And then it will be used to write out the ending of each episode. And so the baby saved them. So maybe it's better that this didn't happen. And one other thing, I'm going to be completely honest here. Midway through this episode, I predicted that by the end, Mondo would decide to not take the armor, that he would let the Marshal keep it, deciding that it was too helpful to the Marshal to help him keep the peace, and it was too helpful to the residents of Moskogo. But it didn't happen. So much for character growth and the greater good. Last year with Season 1, I only commented on the first episode, and that was it. I'm wondering if I want to comment further beyond this opening episode of Season 2. Let me know your thoughts on that also. Oh, and there is also a reveal at the end of this episode that I'm not going to talk about. I think I'll just let you watch it and make of it what you will. I think they have been subplotting this since Season 1, and we'll see what happens. But quite frankly, I am more interested in exploring the themes presented in Star Wars and in this series than in speculation on future episodes. And there are already plenty of other YouTube videos that are doing this already. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Please leave a comment. If you like what I'm doing, be sure to click like, click subscribe, and smash that bell notification icon so you can know when I release new videos. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy.